Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by AWS and CloudBees. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel ahead. Before we get things rolling, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review. First, today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our session, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude this live session today. If you'd like to engage with us, there are a few ways that you can do so. The first of which, and the easiest to do, is the chat tab, which can be found on the right side of the screen. I'd like you to go ahead and start testing that functionality with us right now by letting us know where you're joining us from. If you have any questions, we do request that you submit those to the Q&A tab directly to the right of the chat tab. That just helps us keep them organized and ensures that we can get to your questions in a timely manner. If you jump over to where it says handouts, you'll notice there are a couple of resources that are available there for you. The slides will be available toward the end of the program, and I'll let you know when those are available, so hang tight on those. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around for the duration of our conversation. Our topic today is deploying with confidence using CloudBees CDRO and Argo rollouts on Amazon EKS. I'm joined today by Urvashi Singh, lead architect at CloudBees, and Welly Shah, principal partner solutions architect for DevOps at AWS. So Urvashi and Welly, thank you both so much for joining me today on Techstrong Learning. Welly, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, thanks so much, Cody. Again, great to meet everybody today. As mentioned by Cody, here's both of us, myself, Welly, and Ovarsi. I'm a principal partner solution architect at AWS, where I lead the co-engineering and co-build and co-innovations with a lot of the strategic ISV partners, such as CloudBees. And I'm also part of the technical field community with area of focus such as management and governance, developer experience, and also open source. Uparsi, you want to say hello to the audience before we get started?
Sure. Thanks, Willie. So hi, everyone. I'm Urvashi Singh. I'm a lead architect for CloudBees. I primarily work on our CDRO solution, which helps our customers build, deploy, and release their softwares into production. I've been doing software development for more than 20 years now. This is a space I love, and as an engineer and as a technical person, I love working for CloudBees, where we're building solutions for essentially people like me. So, it's great to be here. Looking forward to the session today.
Thanks so much, Uparsi. As Uparsi mentioned, like the core of today's discussions is about CDRO and the Argo rollout. But before that, I'd like to kind of set the stage. So I'm going to talk about a couple things around modernizations and also the cloud native applications. So let's get started with that. So today, everybody here has a single focus, which is to deliver business value faster. And you want to stay competitive in your market. So that means adapting to new technology, modernizing your applications, using a new standard and best practice. When you talk about modern applications, it's centered around this idea of monolith application that you decouple into microservices. And that microservice do one thing very well. But keep that in mind, that's also lead to evolutions about how team operates. Now they have more autonomy because they have those microservices. They can architect, develop, they can deploy and maintain these microservices on their own. And as a result, you ended up with this ability where you can make decision very quickly because that decision has this smaller impact to the individual services. Now, that's the whole idea with innovation. Innovation require a change. And you can do much faster if you do a lot of small changes that drive the incremental innovations rather than waiting for like a one big giant leap. So in a way, modern application is actually born of the necessity because we want to deliver smaller feature faster to our customers. And this is typically addressed to the architecture of the applications, but it also actually forced the team to operate in a kind of similar manner. Some of you might have heard about Conway's law. Maybe some of you already maybe heard about it. You can Google it in a wiki. But basically, Conway law stated that organization will design a system that mirror their own communication structure. So this is really interesting because if you look at the quality of the modern application, when you say about modern applications, it really promote the independence of services that self-reliance and communicate through like standard interface such as API. But this is not only applied to the application actually, but it's also to the team and how the team actually operates. Now, again, if you talk about modern application, we also need to talk about cloud native applications. But what is actually cloud native? What does it mean? It's a very evolving term, and depending on who you talk with, you get a many definition of it. For example, do you think lift and shift to the cloud can be considered cloud native? Or depending on the maturity of the customers, that may be a good step forward. For example, running a Kubernetes, would you qualify that as a cloud native as well? If you look at AWS, we go many steps further and have a broader set of capabilities that help customers like you on terms of building a cloud native applications. So this means core concepts such as serverless, managed services, elasticity, on-demand capacity, and also many more. So this led you to focus on the business logic and quickly adding values. So you remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting by using services such as EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, for your Kubernetes. You might have heard about Event Bridge for Event Bus, SNS for PubSub, SKSQ, Kinesis for streaming, keep going on, like Fargate and etc. Right? So the list is keep going on. So now that the technology is available, we have these cloud native services available in our disposal. So what's really holding us back? What's really holding organization to innovate? What are the challenges? The infrastructure and the cloud native services itself is just a tool, right? There are other key components that often forgotten is about how the team and the developer has to operate. This is actually, I'd say, like two sides of the same coins. You need both in order to be successful. So if you want to take a pause here and just ask yourself, how can we empower developers to move faster? And not just by throwing a new technology to it, but also the latest methodology. So this means evolving from doing like continuous integrations to do continuous delivery. And the focus of today is about continuous deployment and that progressive deployment as well. So quick refresher. There may be some confusion about what is CD as is continuous delivery versus continuous deployment. Continuous delivery is about deployment that are scheduled. Either you have weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, for example, you pause everything and then you all sit in the same conference bridge and you start deploying all the changes all in the same day. But we look at continuous deployment, this is idea of where the last time you do something manual is when you commit the code to repository, and then everything from there should be automated all the way to the productions. There's no kind of waiting game, there's no cadence, there's no schedule. Everything happens in this continuous delivery in the sense that it also has to be safe. So doesn't mean like continuous delivery is the bad thing. Actually, continuous delivery is the step forward to the right directions. It thinks about gaining confidence in the way you do a test, and then you promote your application from one environment to the next. And then you take another step into that is continuous deployment is about deployment safely to the productions in the automated way, of course. That means like managing the risks, also minimizing the potential impact. So that means like there's a lot of things you have to have, like test automation, security tests, and that has to be integrated to the pipelines. And the idea is that you have a high degree of confidence that your deployment will be going smoothly into the productions. So to reach that level of maturity, you need some of these guardrails, as I said. I mentioned earlier about progressive deployments. You need to have a quality test, security tests. You have to have compliance. You have to have observability. You have to monitor when things goes wrong, and you have a way to control and fail back. Least privilege access model. You also want to avoid manual changes by having everything as a code or using infrastructure as code, essentially. So for some of you, this is maybe already a very clear picture, but if we talk about progressive deployments, you have to do at least give some mentions about some of the common deployment strategy. like blue-green deployment or canary deployments. Blue-green, I think, is very clear. It's about having two separate environments. The blue is the existing one. Green is your new version of your applications. And you shift traffic from blue to green. And the idea in here is that you increase application availability by having two separate environments, which is identical, and you reduce the risk of deployment because if something goes wrong, you still have the old environment where you can shift the traffic. So this case, you can see in here that the traffic moved, of course, from blue to green. The benefit of blue-green deployment, as everybody may be agreeing here, is that it's easy to implement. It's well understood. Rollback also pretty straightforward. You just shift the traffic back from the old to the new environments. But it has some drawbacks, of course, like now you have to replicate two environments that will incur costs and also complexity. But there's also a potential impact in terms like, because if you have to shift all of the traffic from one environment to the other. So if you have this session stickiness and etc., then some user has to reset the connections and etc. So the other way and the better way would be to do canary deployments, which is rolling out subset of your version of your new code to a users or set of cell-based architecture where you have certain number of server or infrastructures. So the idea here, like you deploy small subsets, test it, keep some back-in time, and then start to rolling out to more and more like a server infrastructure or to your users. And the canary deployments serve as that early warning indicators. So you can see how much impact you have, and then you can set up your rollback strategy accordingly. So as I said in here, like you start with small groups, then you do your initial testing, you bake. Sometimes you go maybe from 10%, 30%, etc., all the way to you hit 100%. Kind of release is very much aligned with progressive deployments because it has this lowest risk prone compared to other deployment strategy because you have this level of control. Now, when you talk about deployment, of course, sometimes accident happens, so you have to have a way to roll back, right? And in canary deployment, that typically means you go back to older versions of your application. So you just install that same versions in your environment. That means typically creating a new pod, creating a new deployments. In blue-green, you have to shift the traffic. And the whole idea in here is make sure you have a rollback plan on like when things goes wrong. So there's a couple of those ideas. The other idea I want to highlight is observability. It's often overlooked, but it's actually very important. Like you want to catch the issues as soon as possible. And the sooner you actually catch the issues, like when you're still doing 10% canary deployments or maybe 20%, it's actually cheaper to fix, right? And then for that, you have to have observability throughout your continuous delivery and deployment lifecycle. Just ensure you have the right alarms, right metrics to measures, also having the right logs, and also visibility to any downstream system that you have a dependency on. All right, I'm talking quickly on some of the key concepts in here. Quick recap. Innovation is the main driver of how architecture changes over time in terms of applications and also how the team operates. So this is kind of like a normal evolution of that software developments. Adopting cloud native services helps you in terms like remove a lot of these undifferentiated heavy liftings and making many small changes and do it often in the automated way with safety mechanisms such as canary deployment, rollback, and observability is really the key for you to achieve that rapid pace of innovations. So now I'm going to invite Varsi to dive deeper into some of these key ideas from a CloudBees perspective. So Varsi, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Eli. And I completely agree with what you said about adopting modern application architecture for businesses. Being able to deliver features faster in smaller increments is critical for businesses to be successful in today's market. Modern applications and cloud-native technologies are really the key for achieving that. And that's where CloudBees comes in. At CloudBees, we help our customers at all stages of their software modernization and cloud-native journey. So CloudBees provides an end-to-end software delivery platform from code commit to release to releasing their software into production with visibility and control across their entire software delivery pipeline. But like you mentioned earlier, right? So managing a modern application architecture at an enterprise scale has several challenges, and it can't be solved by a single solution. It really requires many different technologies to be integrated and to be able and for enterprises to leverage these different technologies in a seamless and integrated fashion. So at CloudBees, we again recognize this challenge, not just for modern applications, but in a hybrid world where enterprises could be migrating over or moving to a more modern platform. So they have a mix of existing investments in quote unquote traditional applications or technologies, and they're also moving towards the modern architecture. So with that in mind, we support a lot of different integrations through our open ecosystem for third-party tools and open source solutions and services. This slide shows just some of those services and tools that we support. And one of these tools is Argo Rollout that we'll focus on in today's session. So, excuse me. So Argo Rollout is really a Kubernetes controller and a set of CRDs that allow customers to do deployments into Kubernetes using more advanced deployment strategies such as canary, blue-green, canary analysis, and progressive delivery, which are not natively supported by Kubernetes. Using Argo Rollout with CDRO allows them to use not just the capabilities that are provided or supported with Argo Rollout itself, things like the advanced deployment strategies I mentioned, or support for monitoring tools and metrics and traffic shaping, but also they get real-time visibility into the phased rollout as it's happening or as it's being handled by Argo Rollout, along with complete control and the same checks and gates that are available for more traditional applications. So they have this single integrated solution that works for their existing investments for traditional applications, along with the modern applications where they want to eventually go towards. So in today's session, we'll use the GitOps workflow to show how the deployments to AWS EKS cluster can be done through CDRO along with Argo Rollout. So in most basic terms, the idea of a GitOps workflow is that your Git repository is your system for not just your application code, which is a given, but also for the desired state of the infrastructure on which your application would be running in a production environment. So if you look at this flow from sort of left to right, the GitOps flow would start with the developer checking in code into a Git repository. That check-in would trigger a CI build in your build system. One of the things, of course, the build process would do the builds, generate artifacts. It could be running tests. It could be running various integration tests and analysis and scans that you mentioned earlier, Veli. But in addition, upon successful completion of the build process, build artifacts would get generated. So in case of a microservices-based application or a modern application, your container images are generated. So they would get pushed to a Docker registry or a container registry. And then in addition, the build system would also update the Kubernetes manifests, which describe the infrastructure that the application is going to be using when it's running in a Kubernetes cluster. So that check-in also happens to a Git repository, and this in turn would trigger the sort of the deployment process or the release process for releasing your new version of your application into the Kubernetes cluster. So this blue part is what we'll focus on in today's demo and see how all of this works together in CDRO with Argo Rollout deploying into an Amazon EKS cluster. So actually, let me share my screen at this point so we can see what how we would do this flow. So I'm going to share my entire desktop because I'll be switching between different applications. So hopefully this works. Willie, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it fine. Okay. There's also a couple questions, but we can table that when you kind of maybe in the middle of your demo. So please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Just let me know when we want to take up the questions at the right time. Okay, so before I start off with the demo, I just want to sort of explain some of the concepts in CDRO, our solution for continuous delivery and release orchestration. So one of the key pieces is a release concept in the system. So release is really sort of the delivery vehicle that you would use to deliver your new features or software to your users. And if I drill into an existing release that I have already set up here, so you can see that this release has sort of 3 columns. These columns are essentially stages in our release pipeline. So a release has, you can think of a release as something which has two, or think of 2 concepts when you're thinking about the release, or 2 aspects. One is the pipeline itself, which defines the stages and tasks and various checks that you may want to do as part of releasing your features to your end users. So the other concept is this concept of the release payload itself, essentially your bill of materials for what is getting released, the artifacts, the container images, the applications that are part of the release payload itself. So in CDRO, you can model both of these constructs. And so for example, in this sample release, we have 3 stages that we've defined. There's a dev stage, there's a verification stage, and a production stage. For demo purposes, I've kept this pipeline very simple. It mostly does deployments into different environments in each of these stages. But you can also see that it does some of the other tasks or activities that Veli had mentioned, which are critical for a modern application, right? So different concepts of testing at different stages of your software delivery pipeline, right? So for example, in what we've defined as a dev stage, let's say we want to do integration tests with existing microservices or other applications that are being leveraged by this particular application that we're releasing. So you can define that in your pipeline. Similarly, in our verification, we've defined like an eventual task where we publish the results of a test to a Slack channel. So different teams could be subscribing to these channels, and they can see the results that are published. So the users don't have to come into the application to see how the release is going. We work with the tools that you may be using in your enterprises. And finally, in the production stage, again, this is not reflective of a true production environment, but this is more of a demo pipeline. So I've only defined a single task here, which just deploys the application into production. So we'll see this release in action once I kick off the release. But I just want to sort of go through some of the key concepts here. So Willie, let me know if you have any questions, or if there are any questions from the audience, because I realize I'm going really fast through all this. So, and there are a lot of details. So just let me know if there are any questions.
Yeah, so there's one question so far, about whether the integration with Argo rollout, is that on specific versions of the CDRO, or is that available? If you remember, maybe the version numbers that a customer should use.
So yes, so that's a very good question. So it is a recent integration with Argo rollout. So I believe the first version of this support went out in version 23.04. And then we'll continue to iterate over this integration. And along with that, there is a certain version of Kubernetes cluster also that's supported for this particular integration. So it's, or rather a set of versions of Kubernetes, since the Kubernetes ecosystem also moves really fast. So yes, this capability is available in the new version of CDRO that's G8, but it's a recent integration, so it won't be available if you're on a much older version of CDRO.
Thank you, Varsi. And I think there's one more question that I feel will be relevant for this particular screen that you shows in here. The question is about vulnerability scan for like an image build, for example. Is there any example integrations? Maybe not the one that you show right now, but then earlier you showed a slide with a list of like a wealth numbers of integrations. Any particular call out in terms like container scanning, perhaps for container registry?
Yes, so we support multiple container registry scanning tools. Twistlock and Anchor are the two ones that come to my mind immediately, but there are other tools that we support, but certainly these two are supported through our plugin integration as well. So the advantage of using tools like that is that you can integrate that into your pipeline at the right stage and decide whether you want to, based on the outcome of those scans, whether you want to continue with your pipeline or stop and go back to the drawing board, or uh, again based on the outcome of the scans.
Great, thank you. Varsi, one last question before I let you proceed, because this is, I think, relevant. As you're explaining this pipeline in here, in the the typical CloudBees CI or Jenkins, typically we have this configuration as code where you can bake in the actual pipeline as a configuration file, for example. Is there like something similar in CDRO in terms like, can we bake these pipelines into like some sort of repetitive manner so that it can be used by other users, for example?
Yes, so there are different ways in which this can be done in CDRO. And so for those of you who are familiar with the product, or even if you're new to the product, you'll realize that in CDRO, there are being configurable, and flexibility is an important aspect of the product. So it's so for any given question, there are multiple ways in which you can arrive at the solution. So one of the ways that you can have reusable constructs is to use essentially the different building blocks that are available in our product. So for example, since we're talking about release, there is a concept of a release template that you can define, sort of this template for your release pipeline. Certain tasks must be there in your release, and if there are certain gates that you want to define, or the different stages that you want to define, you can encapsulate that in a release template and then use that when you're creating a new release and using it for your software delivery. And these templates can be customized or can be specific to different teams that are managing their releases through the product. So it's so you can decide how you want to configure it. So that's one way to do it. The other way, and that's what I'm using in this particular demo, is using procedures to create this release definition itself. So you'll see when I show the demo that, so this is version 1 of the release, but when we check in something into the Git repository, it'll create version 2 of the release, and it's using a procedure to create this release structure. So it's so that's another way to do that. And all of this is possible because our design is essentially, we follow an API first design philosophy. So every capability that you see in the product, it's possible to have code to define that, or code to control that capability. Actually, I can quickly show this view of the release pipeline itself. So this is a DSL for the release that shows you, for this particular release, we've defined there's an underlying pipeline that backs the release, the stages in the release, and so on. So you could define this in your Git repository, and then when a change happens to any other repository, you can have a Git trigger which reads from the repository which has the release definition, and then use that for software delivery.
Thank you, Varsi. I think that's all the questions we have right now. Look forward for the next part of your demo.
Okay, thanks, Welly. Okay, so let me quickly show a few other things I wanted to show for just before we kick off our demo. So we looked at the release, and I mentioned that the release has this concept of a release payload or a bill of materials associated with the release. So in our demo release that we're using here, there is one application that's defined as the release payload. So, this is the guestbook application. So I want to quickly show what that application structure looks like. So this is our guestbook application. It's a very simple microservices based application. We have a Helm chart backing this application. The Helm chart itself resides in a Git repository. So this application model is just has a reference to that Git repository where all the manifests for this particular Helm chart exist. And before I go into that, let me just quickly talk about the different environments that this application will get deployed to. So for our demo, I've mapped the application to 3 different environments, a dev, pre-prod, and production environment. If we go back to the release, you'll see there were these deployed tasks in each of these stages. So the dev stage would deploy to the dev environment, the verification stage would deploy to the pre-prod environment, and the production stage would deploy to the production environment. And within these environment definitions themselves, since it's a microservice that we're talking about, we have a reference to a specific EKS cluster where the deployment will actually happen. So for each of the environments, there's a mapping or reference to the EKS cluster. So let me actually show that before I jump into something else. So this is the cluster that we'll be deploying to. One thing to note, again, this is a difference between the demo setup and a real world production environment. Since it's a demo setup, for all the 3 environments, I'm deploying to the same EKS cluster. Of course, in a production environment, you would want to deploy, you would want to have a dedicated production cluster for your production environment, and then maybe for lower environments you may choose to share the cluster or have dedicated clusters, right? So that's totally configurable and up to your specific use case. But in this particular case, like I said, I've mapped my 3 environments to the same EKS cluster, but they are separated by different namespaces. So we have a webinar dev namespace where our dev, which represents our dev environment, and similarly pre-prod and prod environment. So I can quickly show what that looks like, what resources are currently available or are deployed in this environment. So we'll just look at the pods that are set up. And when we're doing the demo and releasing new versions of the service, we can go back here and see if how this changes. So we have this simple microservice which has a single container, and right now it's running version 1 of our container image here. So now if we go back to to our application, remember I'd mentioned that the application is really a Helm chart that's getting deployed, and the Helm chart templates are hosted in a GitHub repository. So let me quickly show what that looks like. So this is just, again, it's a sample Helm chart, so just to showcase the capability of using Argo Rollout to do the deployments. So it's a simple Helm chart with a single container that gets deployed. So in the templates, we have a rollout, which is a Argo rollout construct. It's a drop-in replacement for a deployment spec. Again, it's up to the users how you would want to configure or create your templates. In this case, I'm using the rollout spec itself, but you could just use your standard deployment spec and then enhance it with the Argo rollout metadata to say that I want to control it through a rollout. Like for those of you who are familiar with the deployment spec in Kubernetes, you'll realize it's exactly the same, other than the strategy part for Argo that Argo rollout provides. So this is the base spec for rollout that we've defined here, and I'm using a very simple strategy for with Argo rollout. Argo rollout provides a lot of advanced options to configure the different phases of how you want to do the rollout, when you want to do analysis, and so on. So again, for demo purposes, we've kept it really simple. So it's a simple canary strategy that we're going to be using. And then we will have 2 steps in it. The first step deploys to 30% of the pods and then waits based on the configured duration. For different environments, we'll see that we've configured different durations for that, and we'll see how the system sort of surfaces that information. The other thing I wanted to call out here was that since we're using a GitOps flow, we've captured all details about the deployment and the environment in the Git repository itself. So we've created these environment-specific values file that will get used for during deployment to each of these different environments. So we have a dev, pre-prod, and a production values file that which has different configurations based on the different environments. Okay, so let's see. Oh yeah. So two more things I wanted to show before I kick off the demo. I'd spoken about the visibility that CDRO provides into your release orchestration and deployment. So one of the aspects there is visibility into your environments and what is running in each of these environments. So I wanted to show this current environment inventory view before we start our demo, so we can see how this evolves and how this surfaces the information as we're rolling out new versions of our guestbook Helm service in here. So right now you'll see that there are, for this guestbook app, which it has a single microservice, and it's running version 0.1 of the container images in each of the three environments. So we'll see how this sort of evolves as we're rolling out new versions into our different environments. And finally, again, on the theme of visibility, I wanted to sort of just briefly touch upon our analytics, dashboarding, and reporting capability in the system. So analytics is a core capability of CDRO, where we provide the ability to see near real-time metrics and trends for your releases, your application deployments, and any other metrics that you want to track for your software delivery pipeline. So we ship with certain set of out-of-the-box dashboards and reports, and of course, you can create your own dashboards and reports based on your usage of the system or based on your requirements. So since we're going to be looking at deployments, I thought I'll quickly show you what our application deployments dashboard looks like. So this is an out-of-the-box dashboard. And so as you're doing deployments through the product, this will automatically get updated, and you can see what's happening with deployments across different applications, across different projects over a different period of time, however you want to configure it and sort of drill down into the details here. So with that, let me kick off our demo. But before that, Willie, are there any questions?
No, so far, no questions, Parsi.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so let me kick off our demo. So remember, I mentioned that we'll be following the GitOps flow, where the CI process updates the Kubernetes manifests, and then that kicks off the deployment that CDRO would orchestrate. Since it's a demo, we're not, and I wanted to keep it simple. So instead of the CI process, updating the manifest, I'm going to update it manually. So I'll switch over to my terminal. Hopefully you can see the text here, but it should be, I'll talk through it. So if it's not very legible, hopefully that will not be an issue. But so Willie, can you see what, basically what's on the screen here?
Yeah, looks good to me. For the audience, if you see any blurry screen, please let me know, but it looks pretty clear on my screen right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Willie. So yeah, so I've basically cloned the Git repository that we saw earlier. So that's what we're looking at here. We're specifically looking at, in this Git repository, where there are multiple versions of the Helm chart. So the one that we're deploying is called Canary Pause with Steps. So we're basically in a subdirectory which has that particular Helm chart. So I wanted to show two files here that we'll be using for our demo purposes. So one is the values.yaml file. It's sort of the base values.yaml file that's used by the Helm chart, and then the other would be the chart.yaml file. So again, this is going back to the whole idea of being configurable and, based on whatever the user's requirements are, CDRO would support you in all of that. So the way I've set up my release is that the versions of course, the container versions are driven by the values.yaml file. So right now, you would have seen that we deployed version 0.1 of the image. So I'm going to bump this up to version 2. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update the chart.yaml file for for my Helm chart. And here, the way I've defined my releases is that the app version and the Helm chart. So the app version is a Helm concept. There are no hard and fast rules on what this version is, but yes, it's supposed to represent the version of your application that you're deploying through the Helm chart. So I've decided for my release that this app version will drive the release version. Will drive the release version also. So I'm going to bump this version to 2.0. So once I check in, make this change in the Git repository, this should create a version, create a release called 2.0, and then kick it off in the system, and we can see how it's progressing. Let me quickly update the Git repository. Okay, so this should update. We'll just quickly confirm. So if I go back to my repo, not here. So yes, so yeah, you can see that it's been updated to version v2 is the commit message, and yeah, this was just updated. So this I've set up a webhook trigger here, which talks to CDRO, and it kicks off a plugin. It kicks off a procedure to then create the release and start off the release. So if we go back into our releases view here, so as you can see earlier, we were looking at guestbook app 1.0 release, which had completed and had deployed version 0.1 of our container images. Now you can see that there's a new release that's running in the system as well. So we can drill into this to see what's going on with this release. So it's just started off, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to deploy our new version of our Helm chart into our dev environment. So I can look at that to see. So it's I guess it's just completed. So it should then continue with its progress. So while this is happening, let's take a look at our environment inventory also, because this is where you can see what's happening with the rollout of the as it's being with the rollout of the new version of the application. So we didn't catch it at the right time that I was hoping we would catch it. So since the dev version had completed the rollout, so you can see that it has version 0.2 here, but the pre-prod and production environment is still saying 0.1. So I want to show you another view of this. So we're looking at, so the environment inventory is a view for all the environments across all releases or across all applications. There's another view that you can look at in the context of the release itself to see where your release is at, which is the paths to production. So here, if we go in, and yeah, you'll see different things happening because behind the scenes, the release is progressing through these different stages. So at this point, we've got this at the right point. So you can see that for our application, the dev environment is all good because it has the new version in place. The production environment is getting flagged or highlighted because there's a mismatch between what's running in production, because this is running an older version versus what's at play right now, which is version 2 of the service. But then we can see that for the verification stage, there's a canary rollout that's happening right now. So this deployment is happening. So maybe if we click on this, we can see more details here, right? So you can see that the original version was 0.1 and the new Canary version is currently being rolled out, which is 0.2. So if you look at the information, it also tells us what the target, the actual target for the rollout was versus the actual traffic that's currently being directed. So in our definition, we had said target was 30%, but since there were 3 replicas running, so obviously it's 33%. But so yeah, so the idea is that the actual deployment is happening through Argo rollout, but here in this view, you can get real-time visibility as the rollout or as the deployment is happening. So we can go back here and see how it's progressing. So it's finished off the deployment, and now it's going through. It's going to complete the final task of the stage before it moves on to the next stage. While we are waiting, Veli, if there are any questions, we can take them now.
Yeah, Uvarti, I mean, I just want to comment, like, it's what you just show is very powerful in terms like having multiple team, having that visibility, while at the same time also do a self-service, right? So you don't have to bug the developers like, hey, where are we on the pipeline? Like, it's all visible in here from the product team, stakeholders, and even the developers itself, right? And I think we just went to the production now, so I just want to comment on that. That's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, Veli. I completely agree with you. So and that's the power of CDRO. So we're surfacing that information, but if you want, you can still go to the tools that you're comfortable with and look at the information there. But depending on the user, they may not be comfortable with with going into, let's say, command line to run a kubectl command, right? So you can so we're surfacing the right level of information in the system so you can make decisions. So right now our pipeline is paused at a particular stage, and I want to just call this out quickly. This is not so basically this is a entry gate into production that we've defined. It's not something that's part of Argo rollout itself, but it's a core capability in CDRO. So, Veli, like you had mentioned earlier, right? So when enterprises are moving to a more modern application architecture, they could be at various maturity level. Eventual goal is, of course, to have end-to-end automation where once check-in happens into your code base, then everything, like all the checks happen automatically, and the new feature or release gets pushed out into production without any manual intervention. But there are some cases or sometimes where you may want to have a person come in and make a judgment call, whether it's because there are some pieces of automation that are not yet ready, or maybe it's because it's a more advanced case and you really want somebody to like come in, decide is this good to go or not, and then proceed from there. So with that, I've defined an entry gate which gets triggered if our load testing results were not up to the mark, right? So the way it's been defined is if there is actually an exit gate also that was successful. So if the exit gate for the previous stage was defined such that if the load tests, if more than 2% of load tests had failed, we would fail the release right here. But that was thankfully successful, right? So, but then, we did have more than 1% of load tests fail. So at this point, we want somebody to come in and look at the results and decide, is this good to go? So I'm going to go and decide that yes, it's good to go because we want to continue with our demo. So that this is again something that that having this integration with Argo rollout and CDRO allows our customers to be able to do. So not just use the core capability of Argo rollout, which are of course very powerful, but then when we layer on the CDRO capability, they have end-to-end control over what gets released, how it gets released, and so on. So now we have our final production deployment happening. Maybe we can look into how this is progressing as well. So you can see, you can drill down into any level in the system, depending on what sort of information you're looking for to see how the rollout is, or how the process is going on. So we're looking at right now the actual deployment job itself. So it does certain things when it's running. So it retrieves the artifacts, which in this case are the Helm chart, the templates in the Git repository. Then it does the deployment, which is internally using Argo rollout to orchestrate that deployment. Once that's done, so there's something happening in our production deployment which is different from our other environments. So again, going back to your earlier point, Veli, right? So we want, depending on how comfortable we are with end-to-end automation, we may want to have some human intervention, if you will, at certain points. So for our production environment, we decided that at this point we want to have somebody come in, make sure that yes, the rollout, the canary rollout that's happened to production is really good to be rolled out to our entire user base. So with that, we've set up the rollout to pause for somebody to come in, do a manual verification, and proceed with the rollout. So I want to actually quickly show what the different views will look like at this point. If you've rolled out a new version and we are waiting for somebody to come in and either proceed with the release or to abort the release if things don't look good. So here we can see that for a new version, we have so the dev is looking good, but yes, in production we have there's a canary release that's waiting for approval. So it's paused at this stage. And similarly, in the environment inventory also, we should see a similar view. So yeah, this is what's happening. So since we're looking at this release, right, so we know that the release is paused, but in most cases, it would be that the person who needs to approve the release would not necessarily be looking at the application right here. So I've set this up so that the user who needs to give the approval will get notified through email and Slack. So we'll quickly do this through Slack to see how this works. So I've set it up so that I receive this notification. So I'm seeing this notification in my Slack saying that the guestbook app requires my response for deployment. So I can choose to either reject this rollout based on the information I'm seeing for this application sort of out of band, or I can choose to approve. So for the demo, we'll just go ahead and approve. So I can click on that button and it should just simply approve this.
I just want to chime in on that. I think that's fairly critical as well. As we see an enterprise, we typically see a different stage of maturity within the team, right? As I mentioned earlier, you want to make a lot of small changes and iterate over that. So having this flexibility in choosing which particular pipelines that can go straight to the production, which one that you want still maturing the testing and etc., where you want to have that extra gate of verification. I think that's very useful to have at a large enterprise.
Yeah, exactly, Veli. And also, it's also a learning exercise, right? So you can decide that once when users are coming in and manually approving, what are the metrics or what is the information that they're using to make that call, and then automate those rules into your pipeline itself, right? So as you're evolving, you can keep improving or enhancing the system, that the human intervention is only needed in just those absolutely cases where it cannot be automated. Maybe even AI cannot take care of it and things like that, right? So we give you that flexibility of choosing what fits your use case. Okay, so I've approved my pipeline. Let me quickly go back and see how it's progressing. So yeah, so this has completed successfully, and we should see the same in our paths to production as well. Yeah, so everything looks good. You can see that there are check marks. So again, like as a user, I can choose to drill down, or I can just leave it as is. Because again, this is a demo, so we just have a single app here. In a real world situation, you could have multiple applications in this view. So you want to just focus on the things which are highlighted by the system to say that that you need to focus on.
Varsi, there's a question I think what's relevant in here before you move on is that we don't see the Argo rollout pieces in here, but there's an Argo rollout behind the scenes, right? Do you want to maybe expand a little bit about that setup? Is that something you configure yourself, or is that part of the package, for example?
Sure. So there are two parts to it. So as developers of your application, you are in full control of that setup. How you want to configure Argo rollout for rolling out your microservices, what strategy you want to use. So we leave that open and totally up to the users to define that using pure Argo rollout constructs, right? So we don't come in between that. Like I showed here. We're using here we're using a rollout CRD, which is it's an Argo rollout construct, and I've defined a very simple strategy here. So this is where users or developers would define how their service should get rolled out, how many steps they want, when do they want to run the analysis, what sort of monitoring tools they want to use for the analysis, whether they want to use Prometheus, CloudWatch or Datadog and so on. So that's one aspect of it. It's totally open for developers or users to set this up however they want, and then CDRO is just orchestrating the release and surfacing the relevant information for users. So that's one part. And apart from the value add that I mentioned, just in terms of just the pure setup needed for Argo rollout, what we've ensured is that the standard CLIs that are required to interact with both kubectl, Helm, and as well as Argo rollout are baked into our agent image that if you're deploying on Kubernetes. So you don't have to do any additional installation to set that up. So that's how it works with the setup for Argo rollout with CDRO.
Thanks, Varsi. I know we maybe have like 4 more minutes before the end of presentation. So before I share additional questions, anything else you want to present first, Varsi?
No, yeah, that was it for the demo. Yeah, we can go to our next slide. Okay, so in terms of the key takeaway, I hope like the session was useful for folks, and like we showed, right? So with Argo rollout coupled with CDRO, you can sort of seamlessly deploy to Kubernetes platforms like Amazon EKS, and using the advanced deployment strategies that are natively available with Argo rollout, but not supported with Kubernetes. And then with the release orchestration layer coming from CDRO, you have end-to-end visibility into this rollout, as well as the visibility into your entire software delivery pipeline that's available regardless of whether you're using modern applications or more traditional applications. All with the goal of being able to deliver new features and software faster to your end users, with reduced risk and higher confidence. Anything you want to add here, Veli?
No, I think that's really the key in here. I know we also have a couple more questions left in on the chat in here. We'll try our best if we can answer those. But I think there's also a couple call for action. So let's go through that and see if maybe it can help to answer some of these remaining questions.
Yeah, so we've shared a few resources in the handouts tab on your right side of the panel. So feel free to go through that. And then we've shared some additional information on how you can reach out to the CloudBees team if you need help with your software modernization journey, or being able to deploy on Amazon EKS or other Kubernetes platforms.
Okay, with that, I think we have, I guess, just 1 minute left, and here you all can see the handout on the chat panel right there. I think the handout for the presentation should be there as well. So feel free to grab that before you end the presentation. Varsi, just one more question. Like that Argo rollout, is that running on the cluster level, or you have a namespace specific for that?
It is running within a specific namespace. You can define how you want to do the deployment. Again, it's something that Argo rollout natively provides. I think there are certain permissions you have to set if you want to run it at the cluster level versus running it at the namespace level.
Yep, got it. Thank you so much. Great presentation of Farsi. That's really useful. I learned a couple new things as well. I think that's all from me. Cody, take us home.
Perfect. Thank you, Welly, and Urvashi, thank you so much for that wonderful demo as well. I really appreciate speaking with both of you before we went live on our webinar today, and such an honor to speak with you both today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Welly. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
So first, I would like to ask our audience to stick around for just a minute. There will be a survey that pops up at the end of this, and we'd really like you to fill that out for us. You can let us know what you thought about our program today, or maybe what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. We also have a question on there, so if you would like CloudBees and AWS to contact you directly, you can let us know there, and then we'll just pass that information along to them. I'll also remind everyone that this session was recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to access this recording on demand. Of course, you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. It will be there waiting for you. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Siva P, Carrie W, Mike D, and Yadav M. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your email inbox to claim your gift card. It should make its way to you in about 48 hours. If you don't happen to see that email, just check your spam folder in case. I'd like to thank AWS and CloudBees for sponsoring our program today. And to our attendees, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you spending time with us here at Techstrong Learning. And we really want to see you at a future Techstrong Learning event. So of course, I will just mention there's that survey again, but otherwise we do hope to see everyone soon. Have a great rest of your day. Urvashi, Welly, thank you both once more.
Thank you.
Thank you.